It might look like winter out here, but the sun is shining and the days are getting longer. That means it's maple sugar time at Shellberg Farm at the Indiana Dunes National Lakeshore. I met with Ranger Kip Walton to learn about how Native Americans extracted sap from the maple tree. Hi, I'm here with Kip Walton. He is one of the rangers here at the Indiana Dunes National Lakeshore, and we are at the beginnings of the whole maple sugaring process at the earliest point. We're at a Native American sugaring camp,
Yes,
right?
we are. Yep, that's what this is.
Tell me a little bit about this. I mean, how does the operation work?
Well, we call this the pre-contact site, and that's before the Europeans came. We're talking 400 or 500 years ago. The Native Americans that lived in this area, the Potawatomi, the Miami, they made a living out of northwest Indiana's wilderness. And they would overwinter in the Kankakee River Valley area, and come springtime they would move this way for the fishing and the game, but more importantly for the maple sugar. They knew that when you had nights that were at freezing and days that were above freezing, you had the sap flowing through the trees. And what they would do is they would take a hatchet similar to this, stone hatchet, just made of stone and wood.
Can I hold that?
Sure can.
It's heavier than I thought it would be.
Yeah, it is a little heavy. They'd cut a V-shaped gash in the tree, and they would collect the sap in birch bark baskets, and then they would bring that over to wooden troughs like you see here. And the wooden troughs would have been much bigger. We're just doing it for demonstration. But they, once they took it out of the tree, they would have to boil the water out, because basically when it comes out of the tree, it's about 98% water. So to get to that 2 or 3% sugar content, they had to get that water out of there. Stone boiling was one of those methods. So they would take hot rocks out of the fire and bring those over, and it would get into a rolling boil. They would take the cool rocks out and put more hot rocks in, and as the water evaporated out and the sugar molecules found each other, they would caramelize. They would then be able to pour them off into a mold, as you see over here. And these were sugar cakes. Yeah, they would make these sugar cakes that you see here. Now they didn't make syrup. Okay, and the reason why is because they didn't have anything to hold it in.
Okay.
So these sugar cakes were easy for them to transport. They could put it in a pouch, wrap it up in a fur or whatever, and they could keep it indefinitely that way.
Okay, so basically they take it out of the tree, they boil off the sugar, they pour off the sugar into this little convenient
molds, yeah.
carrying case.
Sure, yeah. And then they could pop these out of here.
Okay.
They even used clay pots to boil. So they would take the clay pots, put those by the fire, and do the same thing. Mm-hmm. In conjunction with the clay and the stone boiling, one of the neat ways that they did it, more efficient ways that they did it, was they used the ice method. And that's in the mornings they had ice, and the ice would freeze. That was the water. The thicker sugar would be at the bottom. They take the ice off, so then that's just less that they would have to boil later.
Got it. Now, what is this? You've got all kinds of implements here, and I can't recognize all of them. This right here looks fairly interesting to me. Are these the cakes, actually? Yeah,
these are some of the sugar cakes that they had. This is a birch bark basket, as you can see here, just a birch bark bowl.
I'm guessing you don't want to eat that one.
No, I wouldn't eat that one. But yeah, they would actually do that. And this is remnants of a birch cone that they would have made. So kids would walk around with the little cone like that, full of maple sugar.
Nice,
like an ice cream cone.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, or a push pop.
Really old lollipop.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So we have shells and things like that, and just to kind of give you the importance of maple sugaring to the Native Americans, it wasn't just for them to survive through that last part of winter, but they would make hundreds of thousands of pounds of sugar. And the reason they did that is because it was like currency for them.
Okay.
You can only make maple sugar basically east of the Mississippi River and north of the Ohio River, all the way up into Canada. So the Native Americans that were out west and the Native Americans that were down south, they had items that these Native Americans didn't have. They would take their sugar, trade for obsidian, buffalo hides, things like that from the west, for salt, for seashells, and other things that the Native Americans down south might have had. So, good trade item.
I'm here with Cliff Goins, one of the rangers at the park here, and we need an education because I can't recognize a sugar maple to save my life. So what am I looking for?
Well, you're looking for trees that as they're younger, like these that we're standing next to they have a smooth bark, but as they get older, the bark does become a little bit more rough. The primary thing with maple trees is one thing you're gonna be looking for this time of year, since there's no leaves to help you out. One of the best things is to look for the opposite branching of the tree. Whereas oaks will have branches that go every which way, maples, the branches will be like this, and the next round up, they'll be out like this. And then this all the way up.
I'm going to be doing my maple tree impersonation.
So we have a small little tiny grove of maples here. We do have one tapped. And at your last stop with the sign, you notice that we had to have the 12-inch diameter first before the first tap, which this maple tree right here with the tap fits the mold for us.
Now, what do you call it when you have a bunch of maple trees together?
A sugar bush.
Sugar bush. So we are standing here in the sugar bush
of the Shelburne farm.
Okay, Cliff, we found the maple trees, but we can't just stick a tap in them and go, right? You can't do that any time of year.
No, it's very much a seasonal crop. Maple sugaring is basically your first food source of the long spell you might have just had. You might have noticed on the Native American side, this was the first food source that would have been found after a long winter, probably similar or worse than what we've just experienced.
But it's not just spring that brings the maple sugar. There are very specific conditions, right?
Actually, there are a lot of specific conditions, but it is very much a late winter spring crop.
Okay.
You can't just tap a tree any time of year. What we're doing is we're collecting the sap that was produced during last year's photosynthesis process.
Okay.
So as the tree's going through photosynthesis with all the leaves in place, it's creating the sap that over the fall and winter has been stored down in the root cellar of the tree, basically the roots. What you're doing is you're collecting the sap as we get our warmer days. The sap is going back up through the tree to go out to the branches, out to the tips where the buds are, and to burst those buds open of the leaves to start the process all over again. So we're actually collecting last year's production of sap that the tree produced.
Now we learned that you have to have fairly warm days but cold nights. So
you have to have below freezing nights,
okay,
and the warmer temperatures of the day, the above freezing temperatures of the daytime. And that's, again, you're catching everything that's going back up through the tree because it's had a long dormancy of sleep. So now the trees are coming back to life. They're waking up for the spring, getting ready to go through the whole process again.
But I can't just put a tap in a tree and just leave it there forever, right?
No, you can't. Once, as I mentioned, the sap's going out to the bud tips where the leaves are. And you keep, a maple farmer will keep an eye on their buds. If they start seeing the cracking of the buds and they're starting to open up a little bit, that's your cue to stop production. Okay. Because after all, this is your resource. If you keep taking the sap out of the tree, you can eventually kill it, right, and and cause damage to your crop.
So it's the lifeblood of the tree.
It's the lifeblood of the tree. You're borrowing a little bit. Yeah, very much.
So how long typically does the season last? I mean, is it a couple days? Is it a week or two?
It depends. You know, the biggest producer of maple syrup in North America or in the world is Vermont. And the conditions just have to be right. There's aspect and slope and topography and the way the sun hits the trees, and different sides of trees can produce different amounts of sap throughout the same season. You might get a day where you're not getting anything out of a tree, and then the next day it's just gushing. It's just all a matter of how Mother Nature's playing with that particular tree for the day. But you don't want to put more than 4 taps into your tree, but you also can't do that on a 12-inch diameter tree. You got to wait until you get another 6 inches in diameter before your second tap, and another 6 inches after that.
So you could do 4 taps simultaneously if it were a big
enough tree.
And would you space those out? Would they?
You would not put them. You'd space them out, around, and then up or down from your last one. You wouldn't put them all on the same plane of the tree.
Is it just like tapping a different vein?
I guess.
That's just conjecture on my part.
I haven't thought of
that.
Know. I guess so, but you just don't want to come out of the same spot of your tree.
Once Europeans settled the area, they brought new tools that would make extracting from the tree much easier. Ken Priest shows me how to tap a tree and collect the sap.
Okay,
Ta-da!
Good. Very good.
Now,
all right.
Now what next?
Don't lose that hole. Okay, here's our spile. This is from the late 1800s.
Okay.
That style anyway. This part goes into the tree and the notch is up.
Okay.
Okay, so you can find it again.
So
good.
Just kind of tuck it in there a little bit, and then I'm just gonna
gently tap.
Okay.
Okay, and then you hang your bucket on there so we can capture our sap that's going to come out. And here's our little roof for the house, so to speak.
Okay.
Just slide that bad boy right on there. There you go, and you have a complete unit.
Yay!
There you go. We have success in the forest. Good job.
I'm with Christy Gerlach here at what they're calling the Kettle Site. Now, as you know, we've been kind of going along the trail, and it starts out with the very earliest inhabitants of the area. Now we're moved up to, I guess, European influence has come in here. Tell me, Christy, about the Kettle Site.
We have contact now, so we have all these new tools, new innovations, metal, we have glass. So we have the same process, but we have just different ways to extract the water from the sap.
We've kicked it up a notch. Yes. I say, so how does that work? I mean, it's basically the same process. Are you taking the hot stones and throwing them in a fire, or are you doing something a little bit different?
No, we're leaving the stones down on the ground next to the fire.
You have the nice kettle now. So you've got 3 different kettles here of varying sizes. Why do you have that? Tell me.
Well, if we were the pioneers who are camping out here as long as syrup season will last, we're going to fill the 40-gallon kettle with maple sap, and we are going then to put it in the 20-gallon kettle and finally in the 1-gallon kettle, and it's going to be an assembly line, and we're going to just keep it running day and night until we run out of sap.
Now, how do you know that it's time to go from the big kettle to the little kettle? Does it just reduce in volume, or is there something else you're seeing in the product?
It reduces in volume, it gets darker, it gets thicker, and if you were the pioneer doing this, you have the eyeball method. You can just tell by the way as you stick your wooden spoon into it and it waxes off and drips off very slowly, you know then it's time to take it off and put it in the metal or the glass jars.
Okay, and that's just, so it's just a matter of getting it darker, getting it thicker, getting it smaller quantity. But what's amazing to me is you're starting with this huge kettle over here. And this last kettle is really little. How much sap do you need to make maple sugar or maple syrup?
Your first run of the season should have a little sweeter sap, but when you get later in the season, for the average, you're looking at 2% sugar in your sap or less.
Wow. Okay, so if you have 100 gallons of sap, you're only going to get 2 gallons of...
100 gallons of sap, I'd say you're going to get 2.5 gallons of syrup.
Okay, so it's labor intensive. I mean, you really have to tote a lot, especially if you didn't have, if you didn't have a car, if you didn't have a truck, you weren't just driving up to your local maple tree and grabbing something. You're hauling that stuff some distance to pour it into these kettles, right?
Yes, you are.
Wow. That's rough. Maple sugar, maple syrup, the whole process is not something you can find just anywhere, is it? I mean, I know it's in North America, I know it's in Canada, but it's somewhere else, right?
No. Now, this is the northeastern, mainly United States, wherever the sugar maple groves are growing because of the correct climate, and Canada. And that's it.
So you can't go anywhere else in the world and get this product. You have to come here.
It has been tried, but is not successful like this area of the world. You need the freezing nights, the warm days, the sugar maples, and you make maple syrup. Anywhere else in the world, it just doesn't click like it does here.
Okay, Christy, this is the first kettle that we're in. It's the 40-gallon kettle, and it looks like double boil, and it looks like the perfect witches. And what you're seeing is a lot of steam, smoke from the fire. You're gonna have smoked Ranger, smoked toast here in a few minutes. But I want to show what this. Now this is sap.
This is raw sap from the tree.
But as you said, it looks like water. Now, if I tasted it, would it be sweet? Or kind of, have you ever tasted the raw sap?
Yes, and I'd like to think I taste the sugar, but it might be in my head
hot.
that I'm tasting the sugar. And yeah, that's pretty hot. So that be careful.
I don't
I
don't really taste it that much. I maybe a tiny little bit of sweet, but this is the smallest one. And as I dip in this now, I mean, I can already tell there's a big difference here. It's much darker. It's much thicker. And I suspect this one you could probably get more of a sense of. Oh yeah, it's clearly a lot sweeter.
It takes about 50 gallons of sap to make 1 gallon of syrup. In the 1930s, moving 50 gallons of sap called for a yoke and a couple of buckets. Ted Winterfell shows us the magic of the Sugar Shack.
We're here with Ted Winterfell. He's one of the rangers here at Maple Sugar Time, and we've been at a Native American encampment. We went to the Kettle Site, which was a little further on in the future when the Europeans have come in, and now we're closer to the 1930s at the Sugar Shack, and this is basically the same process, but it's been ramped up a bit, right?
Yes. What the Shellbrooks did is they bought the newest equipment available, and it was all designed to make the process easier for the human, quicker, less fuel.
So once we get inside the sugar shack, the magic happens. What exactly happens?
The magic happens in the sugar shack. The sap comes in through an elevated tank, keeping the level almost perfect all the time. The fire is heating up the thin metal and the thin surface of the sap so that it evaporates quickly, moving through a controlled process. It's a production line. And once we get that production line going, we can start taking syrup off on a regular basis. A lot quicker than if you were doing it in batches. It's cleaner, no smoke in your eyes. The weather doesn't affect you. And it's easier on the human. And the process is faster. We get a higher quality off this process in the earlier stages along the trail.
Just a quick question for you about the grades. Where do you get the grades? Is it a different time of the season, or is it just a different process?
The color, which represents the grade, is a combination of early in the season you get a clearer or lighter color, and the cleaner your equipment is, the lighter the color is. The later in the season, there's a little more trace bacteria in the sap that causes the color to happen, and your equipment isn't quite as clean.
So the early in the season batches are going to be your higher grades?
Almost always. And what causes the color? Sugar molecule, hot metal, caramelizing. The more it touches the metal, the more it caramelizes, the darker the color. The better the flavor for me.
So show me exactly how this works and its purpose.
You take this out to your maple trees. You open up the top. You put a little sap on it.
Okay.
You cover it up like you're using a microscope, giving you a consistent layer. The light passes through, and through the eyepiece, you can see a scale in there that's calibrated for maple sap, telling you the percent sugar in your sap.
Okay.
It's instantaneous. So if you look through, and the eyepiece focuses, so if your eye is a little bit different than mine.
Oh, wow. Okay. I see this.
And you're seeing.
Okay, so am I looking for the blue line here?
The difference between the white and the blue, is there a color separation?
Yes, a definite color separation at about 4.
At 4.
Right.
Believe it or not, that agrees with the old hydrometer.
Wow.
That's the amount of sugar that's in that sap at this time.
Okay.
Which has been concentrated from the trees already. Last night it froze, so we threw out the ice, which is mostly water, so we have a little bit sweeter sap already.
Now, this would be, you could check your trees to see if they're trees that are producers, basically.
Yes. I would, during the season, I'd go out and test each tree. Record tree X has 2%, tree Y has 1.5%. If I did that for 2 or 3 years and tree Y kept having 1.5%, it'd become firewood.
Got it.
Get it out of the way so my higher producing trees have more space and more nutrition.
And keep all your sweet trees, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Finally, after learning about how to make maple syrup, I was very eager to try it for myself. To appreciate the quality of real maple syrup versus regular syrup, Christy Gerlach has set up a taste test.
It's sticky.
Yeah, but that is not a clue.
This is the store. That's maple syrup.
You are correct.
Yeah. Oh yeah. That's delicious.
And you can put it right here.
Maple cookies.
Everything.
So you have maple sweetening the fry bread. You have maple in the rolls. You have maple in the butter. Maple in the cookies.
Maple in the cookies. Maple syrup can be used in place of brown sugar in anything.
Got it.
And 100 years ago, when you made your own maple syrup, that was a very inexpensive way, where sugar was very expensive. So now that's kind of flipped, and maple syrup is more expensive, but you can substitute in anything that way. And maple syrup has a lower glycemic index, so many times you can use it in place of sugar and not get the same rush kind of sugar that you would get.
So this is a maple crackle.
Maple crackle. You guys can each have it.
Oh, they will.
Okay.
Oh, it's good. It's a sugar cookie. but
Right,
it's-
right.
So we're back here at one of our sugar maples, and you can see this one is being tapped now, and the sap is running through the bucket. And you've joined us on our journey here at the Indiana Dunes National Lakeshore for Maple Sugar Time, as we watched the Native Americans and how they began collecting and producing, and the early settlers, and finally a more contemporary operation over at the Shellberg House. We want to thank you so much for taking the time to join us today, and we hope to see you again next time on Go Jump in the Lake.